I know. I just read your book and I read most of it. When I went to the gym, I would read on the bike. But I think number one, your book is a must read for everybody who wants to get into sports broadcasting because just like this past weekend, I met this guy and that's his dream. Like most guys I meet who want to go into radio or something, they want to be broadcasters, and you really describe what it's really like to be in it. And I'm just wondering, is that why you wrote the book or what was your reason?
Well, number one, thank you for having me on your podcast and video on YouTube.
Mhm.
The reason I wrote the book is that even if I can help one person who reads the book through whether it's encouragement or inspiration or just the basic staples of our industry, then it was worth it. And I've been very, very blessed. God has been incredibly abundant with his blessings and grace to me that I've experienced some challenges, okay, that you get in this business,
Yeah.
some introspective moments, which happen a lot in our industry,
Yeah.
joys, which happen a lot. I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in breaks. I believe in hard work. And I believe that Jesus Christ has a journey for us. And we are given freedom of will. And sometimes we misuse that. But all to the glory of God. And so that's the premise and base of why I wrote the book.
But what's interesting is that you're mentioning God now, and you mentioned I thought it was going to be more. There's going to be more religion in it because I saw you being interviewed on. I think it was either Chicago Local by with Pastor Greg, and then I've seen you interviewed in other places, and I've seen articles of you being interviewed. And then when I actually read the book, it doesn't have a lot of religion in it, so people are not into that, you know. Also,
That's the reason why I intentionally left out religion, not because I don't profess my faith publicly, because as you know, I do many, many times, and I'm not ashamed of my faith in Christ. But I wanted to stay with the parameters and the boundaries of, okay, this is about my career and how I grew up. Now, maybe one day I'll write a second book when this is all said and done, and we will get into that and about my life, my personal life. But really, I didn't really get into my personal life much because I think when you read the book, you're more interested in, okay, how did this guy get into business? What made him go here? Why did he go there? What are some of the stories he can share with us? And that's what I want people to take away from the book. And then if there's a second book, and I haven't necessarily made a decision on that or not, but if there is, you will get plenty of my faith. Yes.
yeah, I was curious, but also in case people are thinking, wait, I don't want to read some religious book because I read a book. Oh my gosh, now I forgot. The guy, he was, I think with the New England, or they beat the Patriots. My gosh, now I forgot. He was Christian and he was a quarterback and he talks about his faith. And I totally forgot. Okay, I'm not good. I wasn't thinking about football at this point, but that was a really Christian book. But anyway, your book is really good um, very good for people to see how it really is. Because one thing that stood out to me is you totally worked extremely hard. Can you describe your hard work?
Well, I do work hard, like a lot of people work hard. I'm no exception. But the truth of the matter is, I learned that from my parents. My parents were unbelievable. I think about them every day. My mom was a tremendous individual, and I know a lot of kids talk glowingly about their parents, and they should. Some have had tougher upbringings than others. But in the case of my mom and my mom was born into a very large family. She was the oldest of six. Her parents were born in Italy. My mom was born in the United States. My mom was an educator before women were even allowed to have the doors open, where she got her undergrad and her master's. And she was a high school teacher and then really a third grade school teacher and loved her students, loved teaching, and was a fantastic communicator. My father was a United States naval officer, very decorated officer of the USS Sierra, the 8018, as a little boy, he would allow me to go on his ship and I'd run around the ship. I got lost so many times. An ensign or a sailor would have to like pull me by the ear and say, "Okay, you see that? That's where your dad is. He's on the wheel of the ship." Oh, okay. But my dad was very, very disciplined. I grew up in a very disciplined home. And but again, when you grow up in that environment, discipline isn't bad. People believe that, oh, he lived a disciplined life. That means like he had to like finish eating in 5 minutes and he had to stay in his room for 10 hours and they had to slip, a tray under his door. That's not the case. Discipline meant that, you know what, Charlie? And people call me Charlie. I really don't like Chuck, but that's a professional name that we can get into later. I think I mentioned that in the book. But here's the story. If you don't have discipline in your life, you are in big trouble. And it's the same thing whether you're a ball player or whether you work in a bank or you're a school teacher or whether you are a businessman. Truth of the matter is, if you don't have discipline with what I call with my children who are now in their 30s, I call it freedom within boundaries. You are allowed to have as much freedom, but here, okay? If you go outside those boundaries, you are going to pay the price and it's not going to be pleasant. But if you stay within these boundaries, and there are a lot of good things that happen here inside this scope, then you're going to have opportunities in your life. But you can't go through life and you can't go through your situation as a constant victim. You're pointing the fingers. You're upset because you didn't get the job or you got beat out by somebody or, hey, my world is crashing. Everybody has issues. Life is not a straight line because the competition isn't with the person in the next cubicle or the person that you're going against for a job. The competition is within. And as long as you understand that, the better you're going to be. And so growing up as a kid, I learned at a very, very early age, hey, stay in your lane, get the most you can out of what you're given. And if you're a B plus student in math, be the best B plus student you can possibly be. Be genuine. I never got straight A's. I was a good student, but not a like magna cum laude like my daughter was at GW. And so, you know what? I got off on a tangent, but you
Right.
know where I'm coming from.
Well, yeah, now why do you have that kind of message? Have you seen a pattern or something? Because it seems like in sports, the attitude is, win. And by the way, the guy I was talking about, the quarterback was Nick Foles. He wrote a
Yeah,
book.
Nick
Yeah, he
Foles.
was
Yeah.
extremely hardworking.
Yes,
But
he
it seems
is.
like all athletes are, and a lot of people in the sports broadcasting business.
Yes. Actually, when he was with the Bears briefly, my biggest disappointment, I wanted to meet him, and I've never met him, and that's on me. I should have made the effort to do it, and I didn't. But, the reason why I feel in sports, and I won't mention his name because it could be one of many, many, but I talked to a professional athlete, the sport is irrelevant, about 5 to 10 years after he left the sport. And one day we were just talking about his career, and he goes, "You know what? I have to be honest with you." He goes, I didn't do a very good job in the last year or two of my career. I kind of was on cruise control. I could have done a much better job the last 2 years I was in the league, and I didn't. And it haunts me quite a bit that I really didn't. I should have been in the weight room, or I should have run more in the off season, or I should have done this, should have done that. And the point being, like, we're given only a certain amount of time, whether you're in broadcasting or you're working in a business, whether yourself is doing a podcast, and you got to make the most of that opportunity. Because listen, Walter Payton gave me a great quote, and he goes, "Chuck, tomorrow is promised to no one." And I will never, ever forget that quote. And he's right. And the other quote that I used in the book, and I tell young people this, so I am 24 years old. I'm doing sports in Columbus, Ohio, right before I came to Chicago. I was only in Chicago for, like I came here in August of 79. I agreed to the job in late July of 79. I was in Columbus for only like 5 months, and I was at a jazz club, and I went with a friend, and we met up with a couple other people, and my friend knew the lead singer in this jazz quartet. And during a break, the singer comes over, introduces himself to us, my friend, his buddy, the whole bit, and he asked me what I did. And I said, I'm a sports talk show host here in Columbus. And he goes, what's your name? And I said, Chuck Swirsky. I said, but everyone calls me Charlie. He goes, all right, Charlie, I'm going to give you some advice. And I'm thinking, okay, here we go again. But he gave me some unbelievable advice that I tell people all the time. And he looks at me straight in the eye as I'm looking at you right now through the window of a tablet on an Apple, and he goes, "You better take care of your homework, because if you don't, somebody will." And I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "I'm going to say it one more time. You better take care of your homework, because if you don't, somebody will." And here we are in this jazz club, and it's packed. I mean, it is like wall to wall. I tuned everything out. There was complete silence. And I let it marinate for a moment through my heart, through my soul. And I'm thinking, wow. So, in other words, you know what? If you don't bring it and you don't come with it each and every day in a matter of character and integrity, then it's going to catch up with you. And guess what? There are 1,000 people behind me waiting for my job. And so I need to come to work, which I already instilled in me, but it just reinforced what my parents had instilled in me. And to this day, I still have it. And the other thing I have that I remind myself each and every day, it's in my Kleenex box. And what can I do for you? There are so many people that were instrumental in my career, in my life, as there are today. But back as a kid, after I lost my dad suddenly in the sixth grade, I learned a lot about how incredibly um, courageous and focused and loving my mom was, because she could have easily said, you know what, I'm overwhelmed. Instead, she did the opposite. She took on two other jobs. She was a school teacher. She worked at a theater company where she not only performed, but did behind the scene work. And then she worked in the gift shop of the hospital. And so she had three jobs, and my two sisters and the three of us learned how to cook. And it wasn't pretty. It was hamburger helper and frozen TV dinners where you roll back the foil and you make sure you have, like, it was a four little meals in one. There was the turkey, and then there was usually whipped mashed potatoes. There were like green peas, and then there was apple, like a little apple cobbler. And I would always eat the apple cobbler first. And my sister said, "No, you can't do that, Charlie." So anyway, that's where I'm at.
Okay, but there's a flip side to that idea about 1,000 people in line, because also people use it to exploit other people. They'll say, well, if you don't want to do this, you don't want to be paid like, $2 an hour, whatever minimum wages, and work 60 hours a week and not get overtime. There are plenty of other people who want to do your job.
True.
So how
But
do you do? Yeah.
money has never dictated a job. So I came from Columbus. I did get a raise when I took my first job in Chicago. And our station, WCFL, I will always be indebted to them because they took a chance on a 25-year-old person. And I was way over my head. I was not ready for Chicago, but because our station was the lowest rated station in American broadcast history, I was afforded the opportunity to make mistakes. where, okay, you know what, I should have done a better job interviewing this person, or how can I connect with this, or what do I need to do? We had no producer. It was just myself and our engineer. And because of that, I mean, every day was a struggle, but you improve every day inch by inch. So when the station was starting to turn and go through a very difficult time where they were, contemplating selling the network, Mutual owned the station, they were contemplating cutting back. I took a job at the Loop, which, as you know, was the rock and roll station. And at that time, the number one rock and roll station in North America. And they had Steve Dahl, Gary Meyer, and they owned the city with the exception of WGM Radio, which was Wally Phillips. But the station was unbelievably hot. And they wanted to push the envelope and bring in a sports guy. And that sports guy was me, in large part because the radio TV critic, Gary Deeb, who had an incredible amount, an enormous amount of weight, where every program director, general manager, news director, sports director, general sales manager read his column first thing. I guarantee you, first thing. There was no internet back in the day. They would literally go to the 7-Eleven or have it delivered, and they wouldn't even read. There could have been a tsunami in Berwyn, and they would have turned the page to Gary Deeb, right? So Gary Deeb wrote some very flattering things about my work, and which I greatly appreciate. And bottom line is that I get a call from the Loop, and I did morning and afternoon drive, and I did receive a small pay raise wage, and then I took a job at GN. I agreed to it in late 83, and I worked early 84, and I took a pay cut. And then I took another pay cut to do the University of Michigan at WJR. I took another pay cut to do the Raptors, and I came to the Bulls, and I mean, things worked out. So there you go. I've never taken a job for money.
Well, yeah, but what about people who are in a situation where, like, I always think about like the multimedia journalists, they've got to do all these different things and
Yes.
they're not being paid well. I
Nope.
mean, should they stay in the game? What should they do?
Well, that depends. I mean, I can't answer that because that's their own individual mojo, so to speak. I mean, we're all different. We all have different responsibilities to family, other members of our extended family. And so it would be unwise for me to comment on telling people what to do or what not to do. I've always maintained, though, that if it's feasible and plausible to chase your dream, you should. And because you never want to look back and say, oh, had I only dot, dot, dot. You know what? If you can go for it, go for it. And if you can't, whatever line of work you decide to take that journey and path, then I would suggest that you bust it. I don't care if you're a butcher in a meat shop or whether you're selling shoes at Nordstrom. The bottom line is you go to work every day with a great attitude, with enthusiasm and energy and a spirit as a team player. Drop the ego at the door. I mean, egos are healthy to a point, but when the ego gets way out of line and way out of your comfort zone, that's when it can destroy you and destroy the other people around you.
Yeah, and I was asking you, how do you deal with those egos? Because obviously, you probably, or not obviously, but it seems like you've been exposed to a lot of them.
Many, and sometimes I failed in dealing with those egos because I wasn't mature enough. I needed to go through the fire, so to speak, to make me a better person and a better leader. And, if you don't learn through your own mistakes, something's wrong with you. You know, by trial and tribulation and understanding that, hey, I don't have all the answers. And, you only get one one time to go through this. And then you learn from that period of time and you look in the mirror and you say, okay, if I'm placed in this situation again, I'm going to do a better job handling things. And I can tell you, I was a much better sports director at WJR in Detroit than I was at WGN in Chicago. And I loved my time at GN. I had a tremendous relationship from Wayne Vriesman and Dan Fabian, who were our general managers, program directors, Lorna Gladstone. I got along well with all the on-air people from Wally Phillips to Roy Leonard to Bob Collins to Milt Rosenberg. And it was unbelievable to be in that fishbowl starting at 27. And so, um, and that's not to say everything ran smoothly because it didn't. There were a lot of hiccups, some generated by just things that happened along the way, some from my own doing. And I'll be the first in line to say, you know what, I should have handled things better. But having said that, when you go through the fire, you understand when you come out of the fire and come out of that storm, so to speak, that you're going to be better off for it.
Okay, well, how was WGR? How are you better at WGR than WGN?
Well, that's a good question. So I think when I was at WGN, I it was a ton of pressure. I was the youngest person on the on-air staff. I mean, the youngest by a lot of years, not just like two or three. And so I was under a lot of pressure on air to perform at a very, very high level, which I managed to do. They put me on a lot of big assignments and a lot of remotes with Bob Collins, Roy Leonard, sports remotes. But in dealing with relationships, we had a department that was in transition. And being in at the age of 27 and looking up to these people, I was kind of like out of my element. I was intimidated, to be honest with you. And when you're intimidated, what happens? You withdraw and you do things that really are not who you are. And so when I was able to then um, take the elements of what I learned from GN and apply to WJR, I had been there, done that. So I knew how the blueprint was. The template was much better in round two than round one. And that's not to say, I was a horrible, insufferable individual, but it just was a lot came at me at a very early age and young age, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It was an amazing period of time, not only for sports in Chicago, with the Bears winning in 85 and the Cubs winning in 84 and the White Sox in 83 and the Blackhawks went to the Stanley Cup against Pittsburgh in 91, I believe, or 90, whatever it was. But I mean, there were a lot of great things that happened during that window from 79 to 94, including the opportunity to do play-by-play for DePaul during some great seasons and working with the legendary coach Ray Meyer, which I loved. But by the time then I went to the University of Michigan, which was like a pro franchise, and they ran like a pro franchise, nothing fazed me. I mean, I came in the tail end of the Fab Five with all the hype of the Fab Five and with all Michigan football with Charles Woodson and company. And you know what? I wasn't fazed at all. You know what, Chuck? Here, we got to do this, 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 this. Bring it on. I'm good.
Hmm.
And, from that, then I went to the NBA with the Raptors and the Bulls.
So if you kept making quote unquote making mistakes or whatever the perception was, how did you keep succeeding? Because sometimes when people make mistakes, they're just booted.
Well, no,
Or not mistakes, but attitude or whatever.
the mistakes were within. The
Okay.
mistakes weren't. I mean, it's not like my boss Dan Fabian or Wayne Vriesman kept a chart with a little checkbox. I mean, That's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to things like, okay, interpersonal relationships. How are we getting it done? How can I reach this person instead of looking at five people and handling things all in every way, five people and put them in a cookie cutter. I had to learn that, what? Person A is different from person B, then different C and different, and you got to meet them where they are, not where you expect them to meet where you are. And so little by little, after experience, you get a hang of that. And so, I mean, my on-air work was solid. I mean, if there was a problem with your attitude or your on-air work, I would have been called into the principal's office. I mean, my boss, Dan Fabian, was great to me. Not that we saw everything eye to eye because we disagreed on some things, and I get that, and that's fine. I'm good with that. But when the reason, actually, here's what happened. In '94, Dan Fabian, who had been our program director, became the general manager like a year before. And so he called me in the office. I will never forget this. He calls me in the office in early August, maybe the first week in August of '94. And he says, I can't deal with DePaul anymore. The athletic director was asking for X number of dollars for the rights fees, and DePaul was not the DePaul of the late '70s and '80s, and maybe one or two early '90s. And so he said, we're not going to break the bank on this. And I want to let you know, next year, the '94-'95 season is going to be our last, and we're bringing in Northwestern. And Northwestern has their own broadcaster in Dave Ennett, who I love. I absolutely love Dave. I've loved him from the moment that we first met because he is a quality human being and we have a very good relationship. I don't talk to him or see him as much as we should, but class all the way. And I told Dan, as I'm telling you right now, I'm sitting across from him. I said, Dan, I'm all in. I get it. Dave is awesome. And he said, okay, as long as we're on the same page, he's doing both football and basketball. I said, great, no problem. And he goes, Chuck, here's the thing. I know you love DePaul, but we will extend your contract to keep you here because Bob loves you. You do, your pregame stuff, all that stuff is good. But you know what? I don't think we're going to have play-by-play for you. And I said, okay. So I left the office, and this is how God works. So about a week later, just maybe a little over a week, I get a call from Ernie Harwell, who's a legendary voice of the Detroit Tigers. Probably if you ask those who have covered baseball, and we're losing that generation now who was with the Vin Scullys and the Red Barbers and the Ernie Harwells, and you could go right down the list of great, great, great broadcasters, Harry Carey included. You would find that Ernie Harwell was in everybody's top five. And by the way, he was in everybody's top five as a human being. I met him when I was 12 years young. So Ernie was a huge mentor. And he called me out of the blue. And I am telling you the truth, and this is how it happened. He calls me out of the blue and says, you're going to get a call from WJR in Detroit, which is very similar to WGN in Chicago. Big station, 50,000 watts. I mean, huge superstar on-air people, sports, news, talk, everything. And I said, I'm going to get a call from WJR. Why? He goes, because their broadcaster just went across the street to become the sports director, and there's an opening to do Michigan basketball, pre-half and post football, and there's an opening to do sports talk. And I thought, oh my. And so, sure enough, next day, Phil Boyce calls me, says, here's what we have. We need a tape, send a tape. He calls me up and says, we want you to fly to Detroit. And I did tell Dan, and I said, I have not been offered the job, but they like to talk to me. and with your permission, I'd like to go. And he goes, okay, go. He goes, and if you don't get the job or decide you don't want the job, you can be here as long as you want. I said, thank you. So I went there and I had a great visit with Phil Boyce, who was the program director at the time. And about a day or two later, they offered the job and I took it.
What's it like to get the call and to be sought out? That's very rare.
Well, I mean, it happened at WCFL. I left Columbus. I mean, I got the call 15 minutes before I was going on the air on a random night, and I thought it was a friend of mine pulling a prank because I got the call. Is this Chuck Swirsky? Yes. And I forget the guy's name. He was with a broadcast executive search firm, and he identified himself, and he goes, there's an opening. He didn't tell me it was Chicago. He said, there's an opening in a major market. Your names came up, and we'd like to get tonight's program unfiltered, unedited. And I thought it was a friend of mine. I said, hey, I got to go on the air. And I hung up on him because I'm looking at the clock. We're on now in like 10 minutes. And it was a 4 hour show from 7 to 11. So he calls back. I mean, remember, these are the days, there's no cell phones, there's no internet. I mean, so he calls back on a landline. Hello? He goes, hey, this is so and so. I forget his name now. And he goes, don't hang up on me because it'll be the last time you do so. We want a tape. I thought, oh, this is serious. So I sent the tape. They flew me to Chicago still not knowing, is this like a station in Chicago? Is this like the a radio station's headquarters? I don't know. I'm on a plane at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I told them, I said, I got to be back by, I'm on the air at 7. No problem. It's going to be an hour and a half interview, and boom. So I get there, and somebody from Mutual Broadcasting System met me, and the station's news director met me, and the general manager met me, Orrin McDaniels. And so I was in the office for 30 minutes, and that was it. They said, okay, what time's your flight? I said, my flight is at 3. Now it's really 4 Eastern time. And I screwed up because I forgot the time zone. I'm thinking, oh gosh. So fortunately, it's a 45-minute flight from Chicago to Columbus. I grabbed a cab, and I fortunately no plane delays, and everything was great. So that happened. The Loop sought me out, and then GM sought me out, and then Michigan sought me out, and then the Raptors sought me out, and then the Bulls called. So I've been very, very fortunate. But regardless of that, I mean, just because they seek you out doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a job. They probably have 10 people or 15 people or 20 people they're going to talk to. It's just like whether a pro team's looking for a general manager or a coach, you're not just calling one person. You're calling a lot of people and you're getting a lot of reviews on somebody. And so there you go.
Yeah, but usually people have to apply to, I mean, listen, broadcasting's different, but still, usually people don't consistently get calls to be interviewed like several times like you have. So that's why I'm wondering what it's like instead of having to
I
hit
mean,
the
it's
pavement.
flattering. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. It's nice to have somebody say, hey, you know what? We'd like to have you be a part of what we're building here. I mean, from an ego standpoint, but you know what? All that dissipates. And because the truth of the matter is that, again, I have to stay in my lane. You have to interview well. And you also have to show a great deal of humility, which I try to do each and every day, because you know what? There are a lot of people better than me. There are a lot of people that have more skill. There are a lot of people who can bring a lot of different dimensions I can't. On the other hand, there are some things that I can bring that, as long as I know that what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are, and I can be a really good teammate and support system, then I can go to bed at night putting my head on a pillow and sleep.
Well, is that how you got to and do the announcements at the marathon? Because I think I heard your voice there, Chicago Marathon.
You know what? I've never done the marathon.
Oh, I thought there, it sounds like your voice saying, making announcements to like clean up or something, or maybe,
Mm,
oh, maybe that's somebody else. Oh my gosh. Okay. Because at the end of the marathon, where you can gather and walk around and meet people, there's somebody making announcements about keeping the place clean or something. Like, thank you for,
no,
maybe that's somebody who sounds like you. Okay, good. I'm glad I confirmed that. All right. But when you mentioned Ray Meyer, what was he like? Seriously, he
awesome.
was,
One
yeah.
of one of my, you know what? It was amazing to be around him. I first met him in 1979 when I was doing a talk show. He would come on all the time, and DePaul was red hot. They had gone to the Final Four. They were in the Final Four, obviously, in 1979. They were defending their Final Four appearance in the 79-80. They just couldn't get over the hump. They lost first round to UCLA in 80. They lost to St. Joe's first round in 81. They lost to Boston College in Dallas in 82. They went to the NIG championship game in 83. In 84, they lost to Wake Forest in Coach Ray's last game in the NCAA tournament. So he becomes a broadcaster. And we had different people broadcasting DePaul. First, it was Bill Berg, who left GN to do the Chicago Fire and become a morning drive guy on a radio station. I'm not sure what station it was. And so when he left, then we had satellites come in to do DePaul, whether it was Lauren Brown, Joe McConnell, Dwayne Stats, but they had to leave for spring training. So they really only did half the season. And so I would come in second week in February and close it out. And maybe Dwayne would come in maybe for a game or so. But for the most part, I got to know Coach Ray very well. We would take walks every game day and we would talk about everything but basketball. And we would talk about life. We'd talk about family. We would talk about Chicago and how it was run. And he was great. I love the man. I spoke to him at the end of his life. He could barely speak. And I called him. In fact, I can tell you, I was with Gene Cady, the former head coach at Purdue, who was a consultant slash assistant coach with the Raptors. And this was probably 2000, I'm going to say 2004, 2005. And I was with Gene Cady, and we learned that Coach Ray was not doing well. And we picked up the phone and we were at an NBA arena and we called Coach Ray. And you could tell he was failing. And he was great. And Gene Cady tried to, talk coach language with him and whatnot. But that's the last time I spoke to him. And he was unbelievable. And so was Joey. Joey, his son, great person. I still can't believe to this day both are gone.
Well, when you talk to well-known people and pro athletes, do you know how to do it? Like, do they usually not want to talk about their business, or how do you get into these topics? Because you said you and he didn't really necessarily talk about sports.
Right. Well, you know what, honestly, and this is another great question. They just want to get away from it. They don't want to talk X's and O's. And, when I'm doing Bulls games and I do like a pregame interview and a halftime interview, a lot of times with players. And I have made, unless it's really where I have to ask a player X's and O's, I go off another tangent and go off through a different lane where we can talk about things that they love to talk about. Some of our players love music. Some of our players are foodies. Some of our players love other sports. And if you can reach them again where they're at, not where I am, because it's not about me, it's about getting the most out of doing an interview that's informative and entertaining, but also putting a player in a comfort zone where he doesn't have to answer, well, you played 12 minutes the other night, went 0 for 4. How do you feel about your 3-point shot? They can't stand that. Now, after a game, if they had a good game, a bad game, that's their platform. I get it. They need to field questions like that. But when I'm doing a 3-minute halftime interview, the last thing I want to do is start getting into X's and O's because then they're going again, and I don't want to hear again. And so, but the players are good, and I mean, like we're taping this, but Billy Donovan left the Bulls, and I became very close with Billy the last 2 or 3 years. We had some great talks as soon as the phone went off because we recorded now through a phone. As soon as that interview was over, we'd sit and talk for about 5, 6, 7 minutes about life and about family and about faith and about a lot of things. And I'm going to miss him very much as a person, first and foremost, and secondly, as a coach. And I admire him very much as a coach, great coach. And as a person, you will not find a better human being. For someone who's accomplished as much as he has in his life to stay as grounded as he has, it's the same thing with Steph Curry. I've known Steph since he was 11 years old. His dad played for the Raptors. Steph and Seth would come to the arena in Toronto with their dad. Their dad would go to the third floor and get ready for a ball game where the Raptors had their, so to speak, their shooting gym, and the kids would be on the floor before a game. And I would go on the floor, and Steph never has called me Chuck. It's always Mr. Swirsky. Mr. Swirsky, can you raise your arms? And he'd be popping them in 11, 12, 13 years old. I'm thinking, oh my gosh.
Well, but when, I do notice that because I asked somebody a while ago who's a sports reporter, I forgot who now, but I asked them when they're, it seems like the questions are ridiculous because then they'll ask these questions and then the player will barely say anything. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
is he, is he barely saying anything because he's pissed or because he's been coached to not say much? It's sort of boring.
Well, I mean, there is media training now. I mean, these guys, these players are so well polished by the time they know how to take a question and not answer the question. I'm thinking, because the media, we're really hypocritical because if a player says something very opinionated or very sharp, we always say, can't you just stick to sports? Or you know what? Come on. But then if they give bland answers, very vanilla, we always say, he didn't say anything. You can't have your cake and eat it too. I mean, you know what? If a player doesn't want to answer a question, they're not going to answer the question. And so my take is if a player doesn't want to answer a question, great. As long as you're polite and respectful, I get it. You know what? If a player has a bad night at the office, it happens. And if they go by the locker and ask a player a couple of questions, do I want the player to, man up or woman up and say, okay, like bring it on. I was awful. Go ahead. And you know what? The media gets it if they do that. Okay, because not everybody who writes a column writes a great column. Not every broadcaster who calls a game has a great game. Not, as gifted as every announcer is at the level where you're doing the four majors or Olympics or high school or college or whatever, you know what? You always want to be better. And so I think with all the questions that are peppered at these athletes, they do their best to answer. There are some better than others, and you like those type of players because they give you something more than just, well, you know what, we'll have to do a better job tomorrow. Okay, well, what happened tonight? Well, it wasn't our night.
That's what
Okay.
I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then, well, you were talking about X's and O's, and how do you remember all those stats?
Well, I mean, you do your homework. I mean, people say, oh, what time do you get to the arena? Well, I get to the arena about 4.5 hours before a game, but the work really, like, for example, let's say the Bulls are playing the Milwaukee Bucks. I will watch Milwaukee's three previous games before our game. And they said, well, why do you have to watch three games? Because I want to see whether or not they have a consistent pattern after timeout plays. Do they run zone? What do they run side out of bounds? What are they running under the baseline? All these things. What are your substitution patterns? And so you pick up things and I write them down, write them down, write them down. And so when the Bucks are running baseline right and they're saying, okay, we're going to run a pin down, you have to be prepared. Not that you're going to jump the gun because you have to report what you see and call it right in front of you. But you can say in the previous game against Houston, they ran off Giannis, allowing Ryan Rollins to take an open elbow three. So those are things that you pick up and you look for trends. Bill Winnington does an incredible job. I love him. He's a fantastic analyst and he does homework with 5 games, a 5 game log to see where the patterns are. You know, going back, let's say it's game number 42 and you say, well, in his last 20 games, well, okay, his last 20 games, I want to see what he's done over the last 5, which Bill does, and he does very well. Because in the last 5, you get in your brain, you get a sense of, okay, like last 5, he's shooting only 28% from the floor. So what do you do with that? You ask one of the assistant coaches, hey, you know, I saw him shooting 28%. Are teams playing him differently, or is he just in a shooting funk, which happens a lot? I mean, it's like a hitter, you know, that goes into a slump for about a week. It happens. So those are things I look for.
Well, yeah, it sort of reminds me back to the Nick Foles thing. He mentioned when you play a game, you totally look at all the tape of the other team, and I thought,
Yep.
my gosh, because it's like it's physical prep plus it's intellectual, kind of intellectual prep, and then you have to remember the patterns and figure out what they might do.
Yes, 100%.
And that's
And but you can't assume, and that's the thing. And that's why when I was doing Philly White Sox baseball, which I love because I got to work with a master in Steve Stone.
love, yeah.
And you know, Steve would always say, for example, on a home run call, well, some of these outfielders now are so crazy athletically that when they leap for a potential catch at the fence and then they bring it down, you don't know whether that ball went over the fence or whether or not they caught it. And so you have to, instead of, you know, this big home run call, if you can see the flight of the ball, go over the fence and the sight is over the fence instead of leaping and the outfielder just snaps it with his glove and you don't know whether he caught it or not. And then you wait, and that waiting for about 3 to 5 seconds is like an eternity. But you don't want to get in the habit of assuming, because if you start calling a catch or a home run and you're in error, and it does happen from time to time, but you got to be very, very careful. And so Steve taught me, okay, like, you know what? Take a deep breath. Yeah, I'd rather have you factual than just trying for that big home run it moment.
Well, what's it like to go from basketball to baseball?
Well, I mean, 2 different tempos, obviously. I mean, in baseball, the great thing about baseball, if you've got a great analyst like Steve Stone, who has millions of stories. And when I was in that booth, I did it for 3 years. The first season was for 17 games. Hawk Harrelson had an eye injury, and Hawk was great. You know, he would call 2, 3 times during that period, offering suggestions or offering really a lot of encouragement, which I appreciated. But I really tapped into Steve Stone, and I wanted to bring out the best in Steve Stone because he not only was a gifted pitcher, he could explain and go into detail without talking over the heads of John Doe or Jane Doe fan watching the game. So there was a game in Baltimore. I will never forget this. It was a doubleheader, and it was a makeup with the Orioles and the White Sox. And so fortunately, Chris Sale pitched in the first game, and the game went like an hour and 45 minutes, which was great. But during the second game, when it was like 7-4 after 3 innings, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to be in Houston, Texas tomorrow night. We're getting in at like 3:30 in the morning. Can we kind of speed up this game here? But I remember there was a pitcher and it was for Baltimore. And before we came up with a word, a sweeper, but he had an unusual arm angle. And Steve Stone showed us on TV. And I told the producer, Steve's in the booth. Can we possibly have a shot of Steve in the booth holding the baseball and showing what the baseball is doing and how you hold the baseball? And sure enough, we did that. And to me, that was TV at its finest because Steve knew exactly how to hold the ball, what it did when he released, and what a hitter is looking at when that ball is coming in less than 2 seconds. And to me, that was TV.
Yeah, it's exciting. That's a great use of media. But when you went to baseball, did you think, "Wow, I really like this," or you were really, you liked NBA? That's really in your heart.
Well, I mean, I love baseball, but basketball is something that I was weaned on as a very, very little boy, and so I love basketball. I'm a gym rat. I love being around players. I love being around coaches. I love following players from their AEU days and high school days. Some make it in college, some don't. Some are great in college and they get to the NBA and it doesn't translate to a great player. I mean, the NBA is a different beast altogether. But I do enjoy, I mean, I enjoy all the sports, but there's something about basketball that really is deep and it's embedded in my heart.
So of course, I mean, this is your dream. When you were in Toronto, did you think you were, well, I'd like to know actually before I ask you that, why did you become Canadian? Did that have to do with your length of time in Toronto?
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought I was going to be there forever. And I said, you know what? I live here. The kids are in school. Everyone's here. Why not? Let's just do it. And I became a Canadian citizen, and I'm proud to be a Canadian citizen. And so I don't have any regrets. I mean, I'm a dual citizen. It's not like I gave up my United States citizenship. I have a U.S. passport. And so I thought I was going to be there for a very long time. And I could have stayed, but when the Bulls call, the Bulls call. And I mean, I know we haven't had the success of late. We had success during Derek's years when he was healthy, and with Joakim Noah and Llewellyn Day and Kirk Heinrich, and then the bench mob came with Taj Gibson, and we had that window of time. But but I mean, the Bulls are the Bulls.
Yeah, because I was gonna say I have so much respect for athletes because it's so difficult. And even when I go to Sox games and they're not doing well, I think, but they're so athletic, it's sort of cool to see that. But what's it like to see the Bulls like really high and then struggling? What's it like to be through all that?
Well, number one, I never broadcast to the scoreboard because I have no control over the starting power forward going down for 3 weeks with a hamstring injury or whatever the case may be. And so I call the game. Now, do I want the Bulls to win? 100%. Are we homers? I would say this. I'm not sure I like that word, but do I want the Bulls to win? Yes. But I also call what's in front of me, but it's never, ever, ever personal. Ever. Never. The only time I called a game where it got personal was Vince Carter's first game back to Toronto after he was dealt to the Nets because Vince wanted out of Toronto, and it was a little bit murky about exactly why it happened, how it happened, but it happened. And the crowd was completely, to this day, the most intense crowd against one player I've ever seen. And I went on the air basically representing the side of the fans where I probably should have stayed more neutral and center. And I actually wrote Vince a letter and I apologized to him because it wasn't fair for him. Um, I mean, he had his reasons to leave, but everyone has made up. They retired his jersey number. I get along well with Vince. I don't see him often because he's on national TV and the Bulls are not on national TV much. I did see him last year. We were on national TV and I saw Vince, and everything's cool. We're chilled. But I never broadcast to the scoreboard. So when the Bulls are having success, awesome. If they're having struggles, you know what? You just call the game.
Yeah, the show must go on.
Yes.
Well, you're mentioning all these people who've been very good to you. So do you have like hundreds of friends? I mean, is your calendar booked? I mean, what's it
No, you
like?
know what? There's a difference between a professional acquaintance and a friend.
Yeah.
I have very few friends, and I have a lot of professional acquaintance. I mean, like whether it's a broadcaster, whether they're players, whether they're front office, scouts, um, I mean, that to me, that's a professional acquaintance. It's not like I pick up the phone and talk to them or share my inner thoughts about what's going on in my world with them. When I see them at a game, I'll chit chat for a few minutes. How are things going? What's going on? You have a good summer? Just back and forth. And then, hey, you know what? What's happening with your club? But and those conversations, let me tell you what, there's nothing that is of a secretive element that is dropped in those conversations. It's not like a scout says, well, hey, we're looking at the point guard from, Camelback Tech. I mean, it's not that type. It's, hey, you know what? We got to play better. We ran into a tough team in the Clippers the other night. That's what goes on. It's not like you have these, like moments.
Oh, because you're talking about like, oh, I haven't talked to so and so in a while, but you're just talking about like in a professional capacity.
Yes.
Okay. But yeah, that's the thing about celebrities or people who are busy doing media stuff. I think, gosh, do they have like an awesome social schedule or
Yeah,
what?
but see,
But
I'm not a celebrity. I'm a basketball announcer, and that shouldn't. I mean, a celebrity is a movie star or someone that is in that frame and that window or that space of using their skill set in the entertainment world. I'm not in the entertainment world. I don't do, I can't talk. Like Adam Amin is amazing. He is a great
amazing.
broadcaster. I mean, he is so young. I mean, you look at the up and coming stars, whether it's Adam, Jason Benetti, Noah Eagle, and there are others that are knocking on the door, and I salute them. Adam can talk, like hip hop with Stacy and all that. I'm just a Joe bag of donuts. I'm a basketball announcer. I can't talk rap. I can't talk anything about that world. I'm a basketball announcer. I'm a gym rat. I love the game. I have a great time on the air with Bill Wennington. We play off each other well, and I have to stay in my own skin. And so, and I am who I am, and I'm not apologizing for that.
Well, I mean, I guess when you said, you're not a celebrity, I think there's so many guys who would love to do what you're doing. You're living the dream. So many people I've
Yes.
met who would love to do that. So I'm sure to aspiring broadcasters, if people want to be at the top, then you are sort of like a celebrity in a way,
Mm.
especially when you take pictures with players. But I don't know.
Well, I mean, like here's the thing. I'm actually posting less. If I have something to say, I do it on my own Facebook page. Um, and that way I can control the narrative. And I don't have to worry about somebody in the basement in Frankfort, Kentucky, or Las Vegas, Nevada, or downtown Chicago, and hiding behind whatever it is, a handle on Twitter. So, but you know what? I have no problems walking out of the United Center. If people want to say hello, I will always take the time, say hello, talk to them and not at them, and there's a big difference. I have relished the opportunity to speak. I never charge 1 cent to speak when I go to a school or a religious event or anything of that nature. And so I have used this platform to hopefully encourage and engage and inspire and lift up with positivity and passion and purpose and perseverance. And to me, that's the platform that God has given me. Games come and go. If someone says, "Hey, you know that game you called against Denver in 2015?" I can't tell you about that game in 2015. I can tell you about some playoff games and maybe a key game here and there. But the thing I want people to remember is, did he give his best effort each and every night to broadcast the Bulls? Was he polite? Was he respectful? And did he do it with a heart full of joy? That's all I care about.
Because how do you deal with the criticism throughout the years?
Good
Or
question.
how have you dealt with it too?
Oh no, I've had to deal with it. And it's not pleasant. And some have agendas and that hasn't changed from the beginning of time, whether it's Chuck Swirsky or anyone else. And I don't like it. I um, have my own personal feelings that I will keep inside because some things are best left unsaid. But at the end of the day, I know what type of person I am, and I know what I'm about, and I know that I can wake up in the morning and put my feet on the ground, look in the mirror, and know that I understand who I am, and more importantly, what I can do for people. And I don't need a critic telling me, well, he's this or he's that, or he should have done this or he should have done that. I don't care because you know what? I'm not jealous and I'm not envious of people. I want people to succeed. I want good things for people. I want people in our industry to thrive and to flourish. And so I'm not in competition with them. I mean, this is about my work. And if some people like it, great. If some people don't, they're entitled to their opinion.
Yeah, because reminds me of when you work in the media, it's like you're running your own race, keep your eye on the mic. I mean, Michael Jordan just simply said, keep your eye on the ball. But really, it's philosophical because if you're in a tough industry and you have your goals and there are haters or people trying to pull you down, you keep your eye on the ball, whatever that ball is.
Yep. So I learned a very valuable, and this is all great conversation, so I appreciate you very much. My first on-air job, I was a glorified intern in Cleveland, and I'm actually beginning, starting in September, my 50th year in broadcasting. And if somebody told me 50 years ago, you're going to be doing this in 50 years, I would have said, you're crazy. But I love it. And I hope to continue doing it. But, again, a lot of things are out of my hands. And at the end of the day, I'm an employee. Dick Enberg gave me a great line, the late, great Dick Enberg, who was a friend. And he goes, Chuck, remember, you sit in the chair, you don't own the chair. And it's very, very true. So I did a glorified internship in Cleveland and also back home in Seattle. And so I was filling in for the regular, I was on the air probably maybe once a week, sometimes twice a week when someone was on vacation, different story. And I remember I was on the air and the Seattle Times, the big newspaper in Seattle, and the radio TV sports critic says, I want to do a story on you. And I thought, what? No one had ever done a story on me. They came by the station. They took a picture of me. I still have it. It had rained, obviously, it's Seattle. And I had longer hair. I did have hair at one point in my life, and it was a mess. And and the headline in the Seattle Times in the Friday column, local boy makes good. And so here, here I am, all of 22, and I'm thinking, wow. And it was a very, very flattering article. It was so nice. And so what happened? About a month later, I'm doing fill-in and I'm interviewing a coach on the air. And there had been an issue with the team with one of the players, with an off the field, off the court situation. And I'm thinking, okay, if I ask this question and this coach doesn't like it, and here I am, 22 years old, would this could really, I mean, change the narrative of my working at the station, whatever. So I didn't ask him. And the Friday column came out, and um, and the headline that was just 3 weeks before, local boy makes good. I think it was local kid makes good. That was it. It wasn't a boy, it was a kid. And I was a kid. But and so the headline 3 weeks later was Swirsky fumbles the ball. And it was like, hey, he's been filling in, but he failed to ask the question everyone wants to know about, and they got into it, and I was devastated. This is the first time in my life I had been hammered in the press, and it was not a good feeling. And I'll never forget, I went back. I was living with my sister at the time, and I went home and I cried. I thought my career was over, like over. And I thought, okay, so I went to the sports director and I said, listen, you know what? I'm sorry. He goes, I get it. He goes, you know what? We're going to work on how you can phrase these things without, you having omittance of not dealing with a storyline. And he was great. His name was Pete Gross, one of the greatest people I've ever worked with, rest his soul. And he took me under his wing, and the people that I've had a chance to work with, Pete Gross in Seattle, Joe Tate, legend, Hall of Fame voice of the Cavaliers back in the day, Ernie Harwell, Vince Bagley, who was Mr. Sports, the dean of Baltimore sports. I just picked their brains all the time about things. And so they're the highs and lows. And it's how you deal with it, because there are going to be bumps in the road. There are going to be a lot of curves. It's how you deal with it.
But one mistake that really stands out to me is what happened when you were in Detroit and you came to Chicago and you made that comment.
Yes. So what happened is, and that was on me. So it's the first ever Big Ten tournament game, and we're in Chicago. And it was great being back in Chicago. I can't lie. I mean, it's the Big Ten tournament. The United Center is packed. First ever Big Ten tournament. I'm coming back to Chicago where I worked 15 years. I'm seeing so many friends, media friends, personal friends. And so I was interviewed on the radio. And I said, and to the degree of, I miss Chicago. It's the greatest sports city in the United States. And as soon as I said that, I knew I was in trouble. But I got carried away in the moment. I did. And it was nobody's fault except mine. Well, to this day, I'm still trying to figure out what happened. But somebody got wind of what I said, and that audio tape went from point A to point B in the sports talk station in Detroit, and they ran with it over and over on a loop. This is Detroit. We are number one, not that city in Illinois. And I got called in and I got reamed out. My boss, my two bosses, took me to lunch and basically had a come to Jesus meeting with me and scolded me big time. And I took it like a man and I apologized. I went on the air and apologized. It's the only thing you could do. Now, in my heart, did I think I was right? 100%. But, but I, I violated by going over the standard of what I should have said, because Detroit is a really, really, really good sports town, and they deserve better than what I said on the air. And and so, that point in my life was not pleasant for a good week. And but I think people got over it, and after that, honestly, that was in '98, in March of '98, and I accepted the Raptors job in August. So there you go.
So it didn't affect your thing. Well, also when you're telling Detroit, when you're saying, Chicago's number one or a great sports town, and then Detroit has this incredible hockey team, at least those fans are like, what are you talking about? We
Yes.
dominate, at
Yeah,
least
I
for that
mean, the Red
area.
Wings were, well,
Really.
I mean, I covered the Stanley Cup Finals with Washington and Philadelphia. And so, yeah, I mean, Hockey Town was the best hockey city I've ever been around from the standpoint that they were all in. Now, when the Blackhawks were there, this city went crazy. I mean, how many cups did they win? Three in 7 years or something like that? And I mean, so every city has its own identity. And during those years, the Tigers weren't very good when I was there. The Lions weren't very good, with the exception of the '94 season. The Pistons, Grant Hill was a rookie, and they were still trying to figure things out. And I think that was it. And so Michigan football was the number one story. But again, these are life lessons and you learn them. And Detroit deserved much better than what I said on the air. They didn't deserve that at all.
But also, you did add drama to the place. I mean, sometimes, people need a little excitement, and that's probably why that person sent the
Yeah, but
tape.
not
This
that
is
type of excitement. I
this
mean,
is juicy.
I was wrong. I was so wrong. And you know what? I actually, the 4 years I lived in Ann Arbor, 4 of the best years of my life, because Michigan, and the number one, Ann Arbor is a gorgeous area. And, to go to Michigan games and to see the big house with 110, 113,000 people, and to be a part of the broadcast, and then to go Michigan basketball, where you're going into all these Big Ten arenas and people are booing Michigan. I mean, these are kids. They're 18 to 22 years old. I mean, give them a break. But it was like Michigan, because, Michigan is Michigan. I'm sorry. It is a great, great school. And but then, in Detroit, those fans were hungry for a winner. And that's why I'm really, really glad that the Lions finally have a winner, and that the Tigers look like, even though they struggled late last year and they're struggling this season, that, at least they have a ball club, that they have, a plan in place. And the Pistons are having a magnificent year. And, the Red Wings, though, they have not, I didn't know this until someone told me the other day. You realize the Red Wings have not made the playoffs in 10 years? 10! And it's not like I pick up the paper every day and look at the standings in the NHL. I had no idea it was 10.
Mhm. Well, also, when you're in Michigan, or when you're here, I should say, and Michigan's playing Northwestern, you must feel torn.
Well, you know what? I mean, because I'm out of that loop, with college, I mean, a part of me really loves Michigan to this day. I was happy they won the basketball championship. And because, when you're in that environment and you are with a school like any Big Ten school, really. But Michigan is Michigan. So it's not like I sit in front of my television set and say, come on, Michigan, beat Indiana. It's not, because those days are long gone. 28 years ago, I called my last college game. So, I mean, I'm right now at a point in my life where I'm calling the Bulls, hopefully for many more years to come. But those things are out of my hand. But I know at the end of the day that when that time does come, and hopefully later than sooner, that I can say, you know what, I squeezed the orange as much as I could.
Well, okay, can you explain what calling a game means? What is it actually?
It means joy. It means passion. It means um, something I wanted to do since I was a little boy and fulfilling that dream.
Yeah, but
It,
what is it? Like, what are you actually doing when you call a game?
I
For
am
people who don't know what it is.
Okay, I'm communicating. I am calling what I see in front of me. If if John Doe or Jane Doe has the ball on the right wing, how many feet are they away from the basket? So if Doe with the ball on the right wing, 25 feet away, gets a high ball screen from Smith, peels off the screen, rolls to his left, comes up shooting, a 21-footer off the mark, rebounded Jones. We go the other way, right to left, boom. And you got to give the score and
It's amazing.
all those things.
And when you do when you have to do that, like are you how do you know how not to mess up or how not or how to be accurate, I should say. I should make it a more positive spin. How to be totally accurate with what you see.
Well, I mean, I mean, like, okay, so things happen quickly at the NBA level. I want to tell you, this is great. I'm glad you're asking really, really good questions. When my first NBA game I called, okay, it was a preseason game in Toronto with Boston and the Raptors. Now, remember, I had done 14 years of DePaul, 4 years at Michigan, 18 years. And so there was no shot clock when I was calling college basketball games. So now all of a sudden, I'm thrust into the NBA with a 24-second shot clock, and I've got an analyst with me. Well, when you don't have a shot clock, you can bring an analyst, whether it's Coach Ray, Rob Pelinka, who's now the GM of the Lakers, was my analyst with the Michigan Wolverines because he played there, was getting his law degree. So they can pop in anytime during the game. Because usually, if a really, really good team is playing a really bad team or an average or mediocre ball club, they can't compete with the athleticism of a really gifted team. So what do? They hold the ball. They want to slow down. So they want to make sure they can stay in the game longer. Well, that I can use the analyst in college. But at that time, before the shot clock and before the 3-point shot, well, in the NBA, it was fast. And I'll tell you what, I was awful. I bet you I mean, I was sweating. My perspiration was off the charts. I was physically and emotionally drained after about the first 5 to 10 games, and I was awful. And because I was not prepared with not only the pace of the game, but the ball never stuck in somebody's hands. I mean, it was boom, boom, boom. They were over the midcourt line in 2.5 seconds. I'm thinking, oh, I didn't have this at Michigan or DePaul. So, yeah, I mean, it was the NBA was a different beast, as I said, and you just got to cope with it, and you make adjustments.
And speaking of the NBA, of course, I mean this is like a vague connection, but you did give a shirt to the Pope. How
Yes.
the heck did you go all the way there to deliver the shirt?
Okay. So, so actually, we're taping this, but a year ago today, Pope Francis passed away. So this is the 1 year marking anniversary. I don't know if anniversary is the right word, but it was 1 year ago today that he passed. So now let's fast forward 4 days afterwards, the conclave, meaning the cardinals, they vote, and it's Pope Leo. So I'm watching, okay, and I'm giving you the play-by-play now. I had never heard of Robert Provost. I didn't know who he was. And so I'm watching on TV. We have just elected the first American Pope. And being Catholic, I'm kind of fired up. I didn't know. And they said, yes, he's from Chicago. And I went, what? I mean, I'm in my apartment watching this. I'm thinking he's from Chicago, and all of a sudden, like everyone is like on board. And of course, what's the first question they ask? Is he a Sox fan? Is he a Cubs fan? What's going on here? Well, the Cubs, of course, claim that he's a Cubs fan. And they put it up on social media with a Cubs jersey. Hey, we welcome, come to Wrigley Field or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden, the Pope's family says, no, 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 not so fast, my friends. And they say, hey, he's a White Sox fan. So, so now I get a call from the Archdiocese in early June. We're planning this event at the ballpark, White Sox Park, um, um, guaranteed rate. And they said, we're planning this big event. Family members are going to be there. Friends are going to be there. Cardinal Supich is having a mass there. We need you to MC. Would you be able to do that? And I said, absolutely. And Jerry Reinsdorf was awesome. He turned the ballpark over to the Cardinal, and the Cardinal and Jerry have a good relationship. So, so it's raining in the morning. I'm waking up. It's rain. I'm thinking, what are we gonna do? And then all of a sudden at noon, blistering hot. I mean, scorching hot weather. I mean, my head looked like a light bulb. And so, and they had like 35,000 there. And I'm thinking, oh my. And so I was the MC. I interviewed family members, friends, all those things, his elementary school teachers, his next door neighbor, priest that he knew, the whole bit. And so then I had an idea because at the ballpark, they had cutouts of Pope Leo. It had been a month or two since he was elected. So now I'm thinking, you know what? I want to give the Pope a Bulls jersey. And so I said, how do I do that though? So I wrote the Archdiocese and I didn't hear back, of course. They've got other things going on than, Chuck Swirsky saying, I'd like to meet the Pope. So I went to our team store. Everything I'm telling you is completely accurate. I went to our team store during Bulls Fest, which was in August. And I went to our team store and I said, I need an authentic game jersey, Pope Leo 14. Can you do that? And they said, yes, we can do that. You're going to pick it up in a week or two. I said, great. What color of the jersey? I said, I want it red. Okay, a Bulls red jersey. They said, you got it. So go back. I paid, not the ball club. I paid game jerseys, very expensive, but it's worth it. And so now I said, okay, well, I've got to see the Pope. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get a letter. And the letter says, hey, the Pope is having a general audience November the 5th. And now, general audience means that you're one of 300,000 in St. Peter's Square. It's not like you got a box seat and you're going, hey, I'll take two hot dogs. And no, I mean, this is so I took the letter, and now this is probably uh, mid to late October. I get the letter and I said, well, I'm going to go because worst case scenario, I've got the jersey. I'm going to give it to somebody who's going to give it to somebody who's going to give it to somebody who will get it to Pope Leo. That was my mindset. So now I go to Susan Goodnow, my direct supervisor, vice president of the Bulls, and I showed her the letter that I got from the Vatican. And she goes, I said, Susan, I'd really like to go. She goes, go. I said, but this has to stay between us, please. I said, I'm going to miss a game. She goes, great, go. So with her blessing, no pun intended, and so we played the Knicks on a Sunday. I'm supposed to leave Monday for Rome, from New York to Rome, have the tickets, the whole bit. Well, there's an air traffic controllers issue, if you can remember. And my flight was delayed not once, not twice, three times. And I'm thinking, oh no. So now, where I'm supposed to land early in the morning, we take off and I get there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the day before the audience. And I've got to go in line to pick up my ticket that will let me in to St. Peter's Square because there are different layers in St. Peter's Square for a papal audience. So I'm waiting in line. I waited in line 2 hours. And so finally I go, they have like a code on the letter, and I go to security, two security stops, by the way. And now it's like almost 6 o'clock at night. And I get an envelope. I open the envelope and there is a yellow ticket, like Willy Wonka. Okay, you get a yellow ticket. And I said, yellow ticket. And the person behind the desk, bilingual in Italian and English, he goes, oh, you're on the stage with His Holiness.
What?
I said, what? He goes, that's a yellow ticket. I said, I don't know the difference. Yellow ticket, white ticket, blue ticket, red ticket. I don't know. I mean, I'm just Joe Bag of Donuts. And so he says, yes, you need to be here at 5:30 in the morning, and Pope Leo will speak at 10. I said, oh. So I'm waiting in line, waiting in line. There's a long line. And all of a sudden, I go through security, and there are the Swiss guards, the ones with the yellow and the green and the purple, and they got the flap helmets and the whole bit. And then there are the security people. And if you've ever seen the movie Men in Black, where they are dressed black Armani suits, white shirt, thin black tie, black shades, and all of them are like 6'5" and just really muscular, and they fit the suit and they fit the image. And so now I said, I don't know where to go. And so I go up to a Swiss guard and I get a tap on the back saying, you can't do that. You don't go to a Swiss guard. I said, well, I've got this ticket. They go to one of those guys, meaning like the security people. So he goes, come with me. He takes me. I'm literally 10 feet from the presentation table where he's speaking. I'm in the second row.
Wow.
And now I'm sitting there, and it's a beautiful day. Here it is, November the 7th, 5th, whatever, November 5th. And the Pope, now all of a sudden in St. Peter's Square, you hear this rush and you hear noise and you hear people. And all of a sudden you see the Pope mobile, and he's stopping. He's not getting out, but he's stopping. He's waving. He goes a little bit more in a path, and they've got this down. It was like, almost like a maze. And so then the Pope Mobile drives up the ramp on the stage. He gets out. The crowd is going crazy. They've got the big jumbo boards, video boards around St. Peter's Square. They have about three or four speakers before the Pope. And then the Pope speaks in like four different languages, and he's done. After he finishes, which went about 20, 30 minutes, he goes over to the special needs section, prays with them, goes over to the newlywed section, prays with them, goes over to cardinals that are there from around the globe. And then all of a sudden, security says, 2 rows, single file, no pictures, no phones, no cameras, single file. I've got my jersey. So people are coming up to him and they're blessing, rosary, whatever. And I've got my Bulls jersey. I get a tap on the left shoulder. Your turn. You've got 2 minutes. And I went up to him. I introduced myself, told him that I came from Chicago. And Pope Leo said, you came from Chicago? I said, yes, I did. And I said, I'm the radio play-by-play announcer for the first place Chicago Bulls. And he goes, the Bulls are in first place. I said, yes, Your Holiness. I said, in fact, last night we overcame a 24-point deficit and beat Philadelphia. We're 6-1. And he smiled. And I said, on behalf of the Bulls, I want to present a authentic Bulls jersey. And he looked at it and he goes, very, very nice. Thank you. And I said, you're welcome. I said, Pope Leo, we want you in Chicago. I said, I wish you had a Portillo's here at the square. And he laughed. And I said, I'm only sorry I couldn't bring in Aurelio's pizza. And he laughed again. And I said, you're always welcome to a Bulls Sox game. We can't wait to have you back in Chicago. And he said, thank you. And I kissed his ring and I left. Well, now I'm escorted off the stage. As soon as I was done, one of those guys, the Men in Black security guys, takes me off the stage and I walk downstairs from the stage platform area. I'm thinking no one's gonna think that they're not gonna believe me that I met the Pope and gave him a Bulls jersey. So I'm walking 2 kilometers back to my hotel. And the next thing I'm like, I am gassed out. I am so dead because the whole thing has happened so quickly. And plus, I have a flight the next day at 7 in the morning because I have to call the game the following day in Milwaukee. So, so all of a sudden, I'm like half asleep and the phone starts going off and people are calling me, "Hey, was that photoshopped?" I said, "What are you talking about?" "You met the Pope. It's on the Vatican website." I said, "What?" And sure enough, and people started sending me pictures.
Oh, wow. So do you think that the Vatican sent you the golden ticket because they knew that you were from Chicago, et cetera, et cetera? Do you know how you got that golden ticket?
I do not know. To this day, I do not know.
Mhm.
But it was divine intervention. And maybe I'm pretty convinced. I don't know this, so I want to limit my speculation here, but I'm sure the Pope had to see the ceremony that we did in Chicago in June. I mean, his family members were there, his friends were there, his school buddies were there. I mean, I'm sure he had to either see it live or get a copy of it. So that's one thing. And then, I'm sure someone said, "Hey, in the audience, someone from Chicago with the Bulls is here." And um, so, I mean, one thing, and maybe when he was growing up in Chicago, he heard me, he was a sports fan. So I don't know, but all I know is it happened, and it was like, from a professional standpoint, the greatest thing that's happened in my professional life.
And they do have a live stream at St. Peter's Square 24/7. I don't know if you know that.
I'm
So you can
sorry.
see it. They have a live stream from St. Peter's Square,
Oh,
like
great.
all the time, even if it's empty and you just hear the fountain. And
Oh,
then the
nice.
sun comes up and then more people are walking
Yeah,
around.
it was crazy. It was amazing. And I mean, I was there less than 36 hours. And I mean, like, I'm thinking, wow. I mean, and so when I got back, um, like it was crazy. I mean, like, TV, radio, NBA people are calling me, and um, I told Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, I said, we got to get an NBA game in Rome.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Now, what's it like to see because I just recently saw his Angola visit. Did
Yeah.
you see that?
Uh-huh.
That was amazing because they've had a lot of war, et cetera, and it's incredible. But I see all those people, and then you were saying people were cheering for him. What's it like to see like religious kind of cheering and then cheering at a Bulls game? Do you ever think about that,
No,
spiritually, or is it
no.
like, okay, what do you think about cheering at religious things?
Well, okay. Here's my take. I, I, I mean, Pope Leo um, is unique. I think because of his American upbringing and also because of his work in Peru, which was amazing, and the fact that he has embraced the poor and embraced those who are entrapped in war. And he just has a different dimension to him. And that's not to criticize the previous pontiffs, but this is an American who um, has an American element to his upbringing, but also with an international platform as well. So when people say that he is the most well-respected person on the planet, that speaks volumes. I mean, like this is legit here. This isn't cosmetic. And so I admire him very, very much. I think a sporting event is just that. A sporting event is entertainment. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, do I think God cares if the Dodgers beat the Braves 5-2? No, I don't think he cares. I think he's got God is omnipotent, and I think he's blessed these players with skill, but it's the player who's gotten the most out of his skill, and all of us have layer upon layer upon layer of skill. Just because you can't or I can't hit a baseball, 100-mile-an-hour fastball, or dunk a basketball, that doesn't that doesn't leave us insecure to what we can do. I mean, like I'm not judged on my performance. There's only one person that's going to judge me at the end of my life, and thank God, and I mean this sincerely, that he died on the cross for me. So,
Yeah. Now, do you talk about your faith at work as well?
no, not really, because so here's the thing. Like my sister married a Jewish man, and I love the Jewish faith. Now, obviously, with Christianity and Judaism, there's a difference because of the Old Testament and then the New Testament. But I think Judaism is a beautiful, beautiful faith. And I I really have um, felt in my heart that what's happened to Israel, I've really taken that to heart, and I hope no one wants war at any cost, at any level, for anyone. But the anti-Semitism that's happened in our country and throughout the world, the religious hate is unbelievable. And so it really bothers me a great deal to see anti-Semitism exist globally, and especially in our country. And I don't like it at all. That's just my opinion. But I don't discuss religion or politics at the office. I don't. And
Okay.
because there's no need to. I mean, I have a job to do. I'm a broadcaster for the Bulls, and there is a division between church and state. And when I'm paid to represent the team to the best of my abilities as a basketball announcer and someone in the community, and they aren't paying me to pontificate on faith or politics. And that's how and those are two subjects I leave alone.
Okay, and I know we've been talking for a while. But what's up with, Jerry Reinsdorf? What's he like? I mean, he's such a big
Oh,
figure.
I love Jerry. Now, keep in mind, I haven't seen Jerry. Let's see, I saw him at the Ring of Honor briefly, and I mean it was brief, like, "Hi Jerry, how are you?" But I love Jerry and Michael, and I'm not saying that because I'm an employee. I love their standards, I love their ethics, I love their morals. I love the fact that they have given so much to Chicago. People only see wins and losses, Bulls, White Sox. They have no idea what happens behind the scenes with community relations and Chicago Bulls charities, which the point person is Nancy Reinsdorf, Michael's wife, who's done an amazing job lifting where Bulls charities was okay, it was good, nice, but it's gone to a different level. And to see these kids in schools with laptops and educational tools to make them grow and learn, and to see families have an opportunity to participate in school and social and athletic activities, and to have clothes on their back and food, and for our players to do all these events. And trust me, I go on these events, and our players are into this. They're not just not punching the clock and saying, okay, it's 30 minutes, I've been here enough. They care about these kids, and they care about these families that are less fortunate. And to me, that's what has been the tone of the Northern Star, so to speak, with Jerry Reinsdorf and Michael Reinsdorf, for what they have given the city. I love both of them as people, and their families, and and I'm not afraid to espouse on this. I have no problem whatsoever, because the wins and losses, I have no control over that. I have no control. That's way above my pay grade. But what I do have control over is seeing how their family cares deeply about Chicago. And that's why I love both of them very, very, very much.
And I'm sure he's glad that you care about anti-Semitism.
Well, I
You
mean,
should
I'm
say
not
that.
doing that for just because they're Jewish and they
Mm.
own a ball club. I'm doing this because I saw firsthand as my sister was married to a Jewish man and what they go through and what they have to deal with. And it's ridiculous. It's abhorrent. It's reprehensible. And to have a faith that is so grounded and beautiful and so like living and loving, and to see the anti-Semitism exist, and religious hate, it's not a good thing, and I pray that it doesn't grow deeper and exist at different levels because it should stop. It really should. And I'm very outspoken about this, and I'm sad it happens. And I'm sad that my sister passed away 2 years ago. And I'm sad that she had to witness this, because she had a wonderful husband, a great husband with two beautiful daughters. And it's just it's ridiculous.
Have you been to the Holocaust Museum?
No, and I want to
Oh,
go.
it's yeah, because that's where I was today. I volunteer there, and it's downtown, so it's easy to get
Right.
to.
I'm gonna go. I just, with the season ending, and but I and you know what? I want to go to Auschwitz as well.
Oh yeah.
I want to go there, and it'll change my everything. And just like I want to go to Normandy. I mean, my father was in World War II, and it's one thing to go and see a video uh, of of what we had just discussed. It's another thing to be there in the presence, and see those white crosses in Normandy or the gas chambers, and it's just it's very emotional, very moving.
Mhm. Okay, anything else?
Nope,
Oh,
I think
okay.
you
So,
did a great job. Thank you.
oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I get that's why I've been around a while, so. But okay, so let's see. Hold on, please. I've got to stop doing this, but okay. So anyway, yeah, thanks for coming on.